Welcome, welcome. Today we're going to be having a blast ranking all of the world's top MBA programs. And really the goal here is for ambitious students who want to figure out which MBAs are actually worth going to and how you would actually rank the top 20, 25 schools in the world. This is the video you want to see. Some brief background. My name is Jamie. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crimson Education, and I had the pleasure of going to Stanford Business School for my MBA. I found it incredibly useful in my journey working at Tiger and building Crimson around the world. And we guide thousands of kids around the world getting into their dream universities today. Including just this year, we had an amazing roster of kids getting into GSB, HBS, Wharton, YSM, a variety of these top business school programs. And we're happy to share that intel with you today. Over to you, Jonathan.
My name is Jonathan, and I'm a MBA strategist with Crimson. I have the extreme pleasure to send dozens of kids to top business school, mostly M7, but also a couple of, a lot of INSEAD and LBS for those looking about the European exposure. And today it's all about, demystifying the rankings. And I think what we want to do with Jamie is to offer you different approach on looking at schools beyond the traditional ranking being the Financial Times that don't make sense anymore at all this year, the US News ranking, or rankings like Poet and Quants. So why don't we start now, Jamie, and why don't we start with something you're maybe the most familiar with? Why don't we start with GSB, as a matter of fact? Where will you put GSB?
Oh, I'm a little bit biased, I'll be honest here, Jonathan, but I would say objectively, so I would put GSB firmly in the S tier. I think GSB has a number of traits going for it. First of all, it's the most selective business school. Secondly, it has the highest salary in terms of average graduates. Thirdly, it has the best cross yield. So if you get into HBS and GSB tends to win. And finally, there's been a growth in technology, venture capital investing, and this tailwind in Silicon Valley has really helped Stanford, both the undergraduate school, the business school, as well as other schools, frankly, like the law school as well. But all this makes me feel like GSB really deserves to be top of the list. The other interesting thing is GSB is ranked first on US News and also Poets and Quants. So it has, in many ways, some of the most consistent performance in the rankings. And then finally, it has the highest average GMAT score at 740, which is, pretty strong. The last thing I'd probably say is half the class are international students, which is pretty cool. So I really loved actually being there with kids from all around the world, from China to Russia to Australia and beyond. It's definitely a cool community. What do you think, Jonathan?
Absolutely. Having worked with so many applicants, I think GSB has been the dream school for 99% of them. And I think, the demand gives you a clear indication of what school is the best. So I will definitely put Stanford on the S tier. There is no question about this. I think the multidisciplinary, the focus on entrepreneurship, the focus also on finance. A lot of people don't realize Stanford is maybe the best school today to get into PE VC, way above Wharton even. So I think it's undeniable. Stanford is one of those very few schools that have an absolute value. Whichever path you want to do, you're exploring post MBA, GSB can take you there, and that very few school can have that absolute value. So I think Stanford by far number one. Also relying on the strengths of the university. If you want, to find a co-founder for a tech startup, you have a lot of chance to find someone in the computer science school who will be more than capable of being your co-founder. So I think Stanford S tier without a doubt.
Phenomenal. Okay, now let me give you a more tricky one. I'm going to throw you the Kellogg School of Management. Definitely one that is in the minds of many candidates, but a bit hard to rank. Where would you put that one, Jonathan?
So Kellogg is, I would say Kellogg is indeed very tricky because historically it's part of the M7. So obviously the Magnificent Seven is, the most appealing, I would say, club of schools for the majority of MBA applicants. So I think that legitimacy really allows them to attract very quality people. I would say Kellogg is also the school I've heard the most favorable return from people who have attended the school in terms of community. I think the Kellogg community will be on par with the Stanford community in terms of alumni strengths and close-knit community for a campus that is a bit remote but still have access to the Chicago greater area. So I would put Kellogg, honestly, as of now, I'll put it in the A tier because I think they do very well in terms of career placement, consulting, finance, tech, they up there. They really attract good people, but I would say it's not an S, that's for sure. And A maybe even going down into B once we discuss about some of the schools. And one of those that I want to bring here, Jamie, is Yale. What do you think of Yale?
Great question. Okay, so recently I finished at Yale Law School, which was a fantastic experience, and I'm quite familiar with, Yale School of Management. One of my dear students from the first couple of years of Crimson recently had a Yale School of Management offer, and is actually likely to end up going there shortly. So I think Yale School of Management. I mean, Yale as a school is one of the best universities in the world in terms of undergraduate capability. I think when it comes to business school, they're a bit late to the party in terms of really prioritizing the Yale School of Management. So I think I definitely consider Yale School of Management to be a strong school, but I would say traditionally I'd probably put it maybe at the top of B tier, or potentially I'd put it on the low end of A tier. So I think just to kind of get things going, I'll probably put it behind Northwestern on the A tier as a starting block, or top of B. You choose. Where do you think we should put it, Jonathan?
So that's a very interesting question. I think like there are a few schools in what we call the Super 10, and Yale is one of them, that could basically challenge some of the M7 schools to either take their place or to extend the M7 to an M8 or M9. I think Yale is tricky because you're right, it's late to the party in terms of the SOM, like it came a bit later, but they also produce amazing, alumni like over the past 20 or 30 years. I think the strength of Yale as a brand, beyond just Yale SOM, is extremely, extremely strong, and definitely is stronger than Northwestern. And that's why I think Kellogg with Yale is going to be like a bit of a challenging title here. There are a few other schools so let's put it as A for the moment with Kellogg, and then we can recalibrate like further down the line.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think you make a great point on brand. Ultimately, business school is heavily focused on, brand and, the brand credibility of folks. And for international students, the Yale brand is just so much stronger. We're talking like a 10x difference, maybe 50x difference over Northwestern. So I might even flip a Northwestern and Yale potentially. I don't know, up to you, but it's certainly
there are a few more to be challenged there.
Let's see. Okay, let's see how we go. Okay. Let me give you another tricky one. UChicago Booth.
Booth is, I'll put it above Yale, definitely. So I'll put it and definitely above Kellogg for the moment. And let me explain you quickly why. I think number one, location is fantastic. Chicago downtown, you have access to one of the biggest hub of the US in terms of, business hubs. You have all the consulting firms, the finance firms, like big banks and so on, that have regional headquarters in Chicago. I think the curriculum is also the reason why I put Chicago up there. It's because the flexibility is unrivaled. So you can basically graduate with the same degree as one of your peers, but based on your own academic background, you may not have a single class together with him or her, except for the first one, like the lead course. And I think that ability to take more advanced classes on topics you're more comfortable with, and maybe more less challenging classes for the topics you just have no understanding or you're not very keen to pursue. And let's say if you're not a finance person, you may just take the simplistic finance course instead of the advanced one when you have a CFA. I think that gives Chicago a very unique advantage. The number of concentrations they offer as well, and the ability to take multiple, I think it's up to 3, also gives you the ability to really tailor your studies. And I think last but not least, I think having an impact investor in residence is a strong signal that Booth has understood the desire of younger generation to go beyond the top line. A lot of my applicants, they want to really create positive value beyond the business value. And I think that makes Chicago a very attractive option. On top of this, Booth has produced some of the best Nobel Prize over the last 20, 30 years. So very strong academic rigor. And last but not least, it's one of the only schools in the US, I mean, Kellogg also has it, to be fair to them, that have international presence. They have a campus in London, a campus in Hong Kong for the EMBA, which makes it also very interesting in terms of breadth of exposure, and also potential finding a job, not just limited to Chicago.
I would also say that from a broader perspective, UChicago's brand's definitely been on the rise. In the last decade, the undergraduate rankings for UChicago have gone up quite substantially. And UChicago, particularly given its strength, probably its world-leading strength in economics, that really transcends nicely to the business school, where there are many top PhD economics professors who are teaching these MBAs, and they're some of the world's foremost minds in certain areas, like for example, like strategy or corporate finance, etc. So these are all good reasons why UChicago, and Booth's really been on the rise. Also, it was recently ranked 3rd in the US News ranking. Now, maybe that's a little bit aspirational, but it's worth noting it has a $205K average salary, which is actually higher than even HBS or Wharton. So, that's pretty powerful. But, its admissions rate is far less selective than those schools. So I would definitely say it doesn't necessarily challenge, that end of school, but certainly some of the graduate outcomes are pretty strong. It's also got a pretty small class size. The class size is smaller than even, HBS and Wharton, but it's bigger than GSP by quite a margin, coming in at about 640.
Cool. Now let's go like on since you gave me like a hard one, I'm gonna give you another hard one on this one. Berkeley Haas.
Oh, that is a very tricky one. So first of all, I mean, I like to look at the numbers as a sort of anchoring a little bit. And, Haas does have an admissions rate of about 23%, which is more selective than a lot of these schools like, UChicago, Northwestern, YSM, Dartmouth. So in that way, it's closer to sort of the likes of like a Columbia or something like that. It has sort of the same structural advantage that, we have seen at Stanford, where they're riding the technology wave. There's been a lot of venture capital investments, focus on California as a hub for innovation, and they've been able to really capitalize on that. They also tend to have, a very academic class, average GMAT coming in at 740. So I think that UC Berkeley Haas is definitely not S tier. And I would say but it's definitely probably stronger in terms of rankings than, YSM by quite a margin. I'd probably put it potentially higher than UChicago as well. So, I mean, this is making me question our A tier a little bit, but I'm going to drop it firmly in the A tier above those other schools.
Yeah, let's keep it as it is. I think like you're absolutely right. I think like Haas has become one of the most competitive schools to get in. Like 10 years ago, it was such an easy school to get in, to be honest. It was like the backup of like a lot of our applicants. Today, it has become like a target. And I think to me, like this is definitely like the one school that challenges a lot of like the incumbents in the M7 because of the technology wave. I think technology, it's hard to be better located than Berkeley. It's even better than Stanford, we could argue. So for me, it's definitely A tier. Now we may move some school on the B tier in a bit, but as of today, it's definitely like I think Berkeley is like not S tier, but like strong A tier without any doubt.
Okay, so now I'm going to throw you. I'm going to raise you with an even spicier one, and that's going to be the Judge Business School at Cambridge. And I throw you this one because obviously Cambridge has got this strong brand around the world, but its business school is very nascent. So where do you put the Judge Business School? Time to judge.
Excellent questions. 10 years ago, I would have put them in D. 5 years ago in C. I think this year I'll put them as a strong B. And let me explain you why. You're absolutely right. The brand is, I think you have few universities in the world that have an absolute brand. You have Harvard, Yale, Stanford, MIT maybe, and then you have Oxford, Cambridge for the rest of the world. Those are the only 2 universities in the world that can challenge some of the greatest names in the US. So Cambridge has been growing their program. In full disclosure, Cambridge was a school like, we will never fail placing someone, back in 2018, 2019. We have had some failures over the years. It's getting harder and harder to get in. I think they're getting more and better applicants. And I think there was one key signal. The MBBs have started to hire from like Cambridge. I have an applicant I worked with in 2019 when they're doing COVID, sadly for her. Got hired by Bain back in Singapore, came back to Singapore working for Bain for the last 3-4 years. So I think that's a strong indication that the school is rising. And I put it as a strong B. And I think in the next 10 years, Oxford, Cambridge will become the best MBAs in Europe. And let me explain the rationale. I think INSEAD and MBAs are going to face massive issues in the future being standalone business school. I personally don't believe in the future of standalone business school because business has become so complex that you want to have faculty that are interconnected. You want to have the ability to basically really, take from some other expertise. Also like meeting with people, the multidisciplinary approach that you see at every top business school that have, that are part of a greater university is very phenomenal. So I would say Cambridge on the rise, but as of today, it's a B. Strong B.
That's great analysis. I mean, I've seen a lot of our MBA students getting into Judge Business School with some pretty modest academic track record in undergrad. And, we've been really successful getting kids into Judge. And I think you're right that it's definitely a stock on the rise. My general rule is like over time, I think business schools tend to converge to the overall reputational position of their university more so than other schools. Like say a medical school can be more idiosyncratic, but a business school is so much about relationships, reputation, networks, the faculty they can attract, the speakers that come on campus, and so I actually really think that's an insightful call. Cambridge is a rising stock, and probably will keep improving. Okay, so I gave you Judge. Who do you want to throw to me?
Well, I mean, let's just also clear Oxford. Let's agree that Oxford has a very similar trajectory to like Cambridge. And to be honest, like it's 50-50. When we have dual and mid Oxford, Cambridge, like it's really more about, oh, I prefer Cambridge, I prefer Oxford. But there is no clear winner on the demand side between Oxford and Cambridge. They are very similar schools. They attract very similar applicants. And I think once they get both offers, it's more about the interaction with the team, with the student that's going to really decide them more about one to the other. But I'd put Cambridge slightly above Oxford, but like on the same tier. Now I'm gonna give you an Ivy League. Let's go with Tuck, Dartmouth.
Okay, I'm gonna hit Tuck fast and figure out where to tuck it. But first of all, in terms of Cambridge, Oxford, I think that I would probably agree with you, just because Cambridge does have a smaller class size than Oxford, slightly higher, average GMAT score by a tad, but it's also got a 10% higher starting salary, which I think is quite a meaningful indication. And it does rank better on some of the rankings, but it is extremely tight. I spent some time at Oxford. Actually, one of my examiners for my PhD or DPhil at Oxford, it's called, was from the Sade Business School, and it's got some fantastic facilities, and they've really been ramping up their executive education offerings. But I think that, from an undergrad perspective, economics is stronger at Cambridge than Oxford. And I think that kind of filters through a little bit, because many of the faculty at Judge Business School are, PhD economists who then teach in the business school. And so I think Oxford's undergraduate capabilities in economics being a bit lower than Cambridge may explain some of that gap. But it is very tight. Okay, now where do we tuck Dartmouth? Let's see. So the interesting thing about Dartmouth is actually its business school is not that selective. It has a 40% acceptance rate, which is, pretty high. And the location is kind of challenging. It's also extremely cold during the winter. Now, Dartmouth itself is getting really popular. As an undergraduate school, it's down to about a 5% admissions rate. So I do think that the Tuck school, may improve, but it has been sort of a little bit stagnant for a while. So I'm going to put it in the B tier, and I'm going to rank it actually ahead of Cambridge and Oxford, just because it's been around for a while. But I think it's definitely not in the A tier. That's probably what I would put it in. And I think on some stats, like Cambridge, Oxford's arguably better. But my counter argument is that, the US is the land of the MBA. The US is the land of high finance and entrepreneurship. And so there's a lot of, like, if you just look at the graduate salaries from Tuck, they are a lot stronger than, Judge and Sade. And so even though Tuck appears a bit less selective, I think the ROI for a MBA, candidate is actually a bit stronger there. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Agreed. I'll put Tuck on the B tier. One thing on the acceptance rate, Jamie, I think like last year acceptance rate have ballooned. I mean, you look at, HBS is above 10% for one of the first time and second time in history. I think the MBA market has a bit slowed down, so people really look more at the top business schools. So that's why also like Tuck went from mid 20 to high to 40 last year. I think it's also less people applying in terms of the dreamers. I think it's more realistic people applying. So I think the acceptance rate for the past 3 years have to be taken with a grain of salt. It's still very hard to get into any of those schools, right? I mean, I did have people looking at Tuck earlier this year, though they got into better school afterwards. But yes, so I would say the acceptance rate is one indication that you also need to look on the longer term. And if you look at the past rankings, it gives you a clear indication. And 40% is high, but if the last 50% are extremely good, it's going to be hard for you to get in, right? So I agree, Tuck is definitely B, not an A. And I think we can also clear Cornell like this. I think Cornell for me is a B. What do you think on Cornell?
Yeah, I agree. I think Cornell is probably the weakest of the Ivy League from an undergrad perspective. And I think it's probably fair to say that Cornell MBA may be the weakest from a postgrad perspective as well of the various Ivy League schools that offer business schools. Arguably, Cornell is maybe a little bit stronger than Dartmouth, or it's very close. It's almost a coin flip. So I guess I'll leave it to you to make the deciding vote. Where do we put Cornell in the B tier?
So I'm going to be a bit controversial on this one. I'll put Cornell after Cambridge and Oxford. If I had an applicant who had offers at, Cornell and let's say Cambridge or Oxford, I will strongly encourage that person to go to Oxford or Cambridge, unless they really want the American dream, right? So I think it's tricky because like from a pure, let's say, MBA market demand perspective, Cornell is gonna win because the US, as you say, is the land of MBA. I think the American dream is extremely strong. But in terms of quality of students that I've worked with, in terms of like, the positioning of the school and the modernity, I would give like Cambridge and Oxford like a bit of an edge. But that's a bit of a controversial call. I think like, you know what, let's put them in between. I'll put them between like Cambridge and Oxford. What do you think?
I like it. I like it. They say in business school never split the difference, but I guess in this case we've split the difference. Okay, now I gotta lean in here on some real expertise here that you bring and ask you about the very hard to rank HEC or HSC Paris for the Americans applying. Over to you, Jonathan. Where would you put this one?
So HEC is tricky, right? So HEC is a bit like Oxford and Cambridge in the sense they came a bit late to the MBA party, but HEC is, without much doubt, like Europe's strongest business school. They have produced more CEOs, head of states and ministers than many of like the other business schools in the world. Extremely strong undergraduate program, extremely strong alumni network, but the MBA is younger, less attractive in terms of brand, but the curriculum is phenomenal. It's a 16-month curriculum that was co-designed with Bain. You have 8 months, like, fundamental phase, 8 months customizable phase. I'll put HEC like as a B. I mean, like it's a bit harsh, leaning C, because we also need like to have like, a ranking that makes sense. But definitely it's behind, I think, Oxford, Cambridge, also because of the country. And I think France and Spain are going to suffer of this. It's not an English native speaking country. People are a bit intimidated. And I think the UK is much more attractive as a destination for the international students than France and Spain. And as a result, I would say that HEC is definitely like weaker than Oxford and Cambridge on this one, right? So I don't think it's a C, but it's not a strong B as of today. In terms of demand, in terms of quality of the program, it's fantastic. And if you want to get into like, luxury industry, for example, then it becomes an A, or it's even become an S, because the partnership with LVMH, with Kering, with Richmond is just phenomenal. So I think ranking also going to depend on what you want as an exit. So we've sent phenomenal people to HEC because they wanted to work in the luxury industry, right? So for them, HEC became an S. But overall, I would say like strong B, yeah, middle B. What about LBS, Jamie?
Okay, so I think London Business School is an interesting one because frankly, I don't think I have ever had an MBA student get rejected from London Business School in my time doing MBA counseling. So I think London Business School, it's got this strong brand, but I actually don't think it's particularly selective. I've seen kids with very, very rough undergraduate transcripts. Like I'm talking C's and stuff, getting into LBS with pretty questionable work experience and some reasonable essays. So I'm actually, gonna drop a bit of a bomb on LBS. I'll probably put it in C or even D tier. I'll put it in C tier. C tier.
That's tough. I mean, like, I agree. I mean, we didn't have a lot of failure with LBS, but I think also because of the demographic of students we work with, like LBS, INSEAD. I mean, all the non-US schools are really like towards the international crowd, right? They're looking for international students. I think also a massive difference between Europe and the US business school, except for Oxford and Cambridge that are a bit snobbish about this. I think like the European schools are a bit less regarding on your academic background. They really care more about like your work experience and your international experience. I think it's tough to put like LBS on C though, because like in terms of pure demand, if I look at it, for a lot of my applicants, it's M7 or LBS INSEAD, because they're gonna play the ranking. I mean, LBS INSEAD always top the ranking for the non-US schools, right? If you look at like most of the rankings that have been like, I would say like recognized as good rankings. So I mean, in my book, LBS is above HEC. So in that case, I will need to move HEC to C.
Let's do it. Let's bring them both down. Let's have some real talk.
And let's see, yeah. So then, like, where do you put INSEAD then?
Or I don't want to offend our Europeans watching. I think INSEAD is a strong program, but I think it is definitely not better than any of those A-tier schools, in my opinion. Again, INSEAD's a school where, we've had extremely high success rates getting kids into this program with, solid undergrads. but I would say, you know, our success rate has been almost every candidate with qualifications has been able to land that. The GMAT score is 710 at INSEAD, which is respectable, but I've seen a lot of folks to INSEAD with 650s, 670s for the GMAT before. Now I know that, you know, INSEAD just crushes the rankings. Like, I don't know who they're bribing. I'm just kidding, but you know, they're so high on these rankings. But I've never seen anyone choose INSEAD over like HBS, GSB, Wharton, even like Columbia. I don't know. So I think I think they're doing a good job sort of like hacking the rankings, but you know, real talk, I'd probably put them maybe either, I think I'd probably put them in the middle of the B tier or at the top of the B tier. But I'll throw it to you, Jonathan, because I know you've got deep expertise on INSEAD.
All right, not because I'm French, right? But yeah, I mean, okay, on this one, I'm going to disagree with you, Jamie. I think INSEAD, okay, so there is no way INSEAD can be number one, right? When they were number one in 2014 or 2015, 16, for me, that's a ranking anomaly because HBS and Stanford, yes, people will always pick them above. I have had a number of people picking INSEAD above a Booth or a Kellogg though over the years, right? Not the majority, but like, you know, I would say like 20%. Now, sometimes for personal reasons, you know, my husband, my wife, my fiance, you know, is back in Singapore, so it's better for me to stay over there. But I think, you know, ranking wise, INSEAD, okay, number one, it's the best 1-year MBA program, right? There is no way, like, you know, we can argue beyond this. Like in terms of pure MBA program, that's number one, right? For like short, intensive. If you look at the ranking for entrepreneurship, they're extremely strong. They come number 4, right? Or number 5, I think they raise 23 billion, whereas, you know, Harvard alumni raise, you know, 75 billion. So of course, you know, for equivalent size of the class, it's much stronger at HBS. But I think INSEAD for me is a strong A. I would put definitely INSEAD above Kellogg in terms of strengths of the school. So I know this one, like we disagree on this one, Jamie, but I would say like it's for me, it's an A. Like let's say bottom A you'd like, but
send them up. Let's promote INSEAD. We'll bring them up a little bit.
It's such a strong school in consulting, right? It's the number one school for consulting. McKinsey loves them, Bain loves them, you know, like BCG loves them. They're good in tech. I would say it's just like if you want to be an entrepreneur, I wouldn't put INSEAD on A despite the PitchBook ranking. I would put it more on B and C because it's 1 year. But if you want, you know, a corporate career, you want to go fast, you want something very international, you want a good alumni community spread across the globe, INSEAD ranks definitely like for me in the A. And also in terms of demands, you know, I would say INSEAD it's one of our number one school outside the US schools in terms of demands of applications. So I would put them in A.
Okay, fantastic. So now this is an interesting one, and frankly, one that I'm less familiar with. Tel Aviv University's Koller School of Management. Where would you put that?
This one, it's we listed that school, Jimmy, because we wanted people to also realize that ranking goes beyond just, you know, the name of the school. Now, Tel Aviv, obviously, you know, on the global scale, it's a D. You know, no one really applies there. You know, I think Israel is not the most attractive country for MBA or even like national studies. But I think, you know, that's to show the strengths of the ecosystem. Tel Aviv, in terms of like their MBA, in terms of like, you know, entrepreneurship, ranks number 13 in the PitchBook ranking. Like they already have raised, you know, over $8 billion. And it's, you know, 7 super 10, like, you know, Duke, Cornell, Yale, Ross, Darden, Taper, and Tuck rank behind Koller when it comes to pure MBA and entrepreneurship, right? So obviously none of our applicants are going to apply to Koller. And that's why I put them into D. But in a local context, you know, Koller is like, it's a S, you know, if you look at Israel, like if you get into Koller, if you're able to break the application cycle, you're definitely going to get like, you know, like huge chance of being a successful entrepreneur. But it's also to show people to really look at every aspect of the rankings. But on a global stance, obviously like Koller is a D. But it's a school that, you know, that shows that it's not just the US, it's not just Europe. There are also, you know, hubbed, like extremely strong school in Asia, in the Middle East, and Koller is one of those schools.
Well, I think Israeli entrepreneurs are so formidable. I think about companies like Wix or Waze, both of which, you know, Israeli entrepreneurs, and no doubt the local champion business school would bring some ferocious entrepreneurs through, given the entrepreneur ecosystem over there is phenomenal. Okay, cool. Let's keep rolling. I'm going to give you another one, a tough one, I think, actually, to rank, which is Darden, University of Virginia's Darden School of Business.
All right, so Darden, like if we go with, LBS and HEC like on C, for me, Darden is a C as well, right? I mean, so Darden is part of the Super 10. Like there is, like it's a strong school in the US, good rankings on the US news. Uh, but again, like if I have an applicant that have an offer at, Darden and LBS, 95% of the time they will pick LBS over Darden. I think Darden maybe for the US market is definitely more attractive. For like the non-US applicant pool, I would say like LBS is stronger. It's a great place though. It's a beautiful campus, like like a lot of forests, like in the nature and so on. So it's a beautiful place. The career placement is good. The program is also fairly interesting. I like the application ASS. It's a bit less traditional, a bit less boring, but there is no way it's a stronger school than LBS. But I would argue it's a stronger school than HEC as of today. So I'll put Darden on a high C. Just because LBS is on the C. If LBS move on the B, then Darden will be moved on to the B as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And by the way, Darden has a particularly strong set of alumni in the world of investing, mainly from UVA's undergraduate program, but they've got really strong value investing roots with legendary alumni like John Griffin, former founder of Blue Ridge Capital, or a Tiger Cub. And they've had a lot of success attracting talented investors over the years. That part of America is also growing in popularity, I would say. There's much less crime, and it's a safe place to be based. A quality city, good cost of living. So the area is also, I guess, growing in relative appeal. It hasn't been necessarily a hot spot for a while, but it is, I would say it's a rising stock.
Shall we move it then on B above top then?
Up to you. I think, no, I like your position actually. I think I wouldn't choose Darden over these Ivy League schools or Cambridge and Oxford. Maybe because I'm being brand snobbish by mistake, but I think it's certainly intriguing. I think, and to an American audience, I'd probably rank it higher than LBS, but for our global community, I think it's in a fine spot.
All right, so I know you have to run for another meeting, so let's do the last one today. A good one, MIT. Sloan.
Oh, so my dear co-founder Feng Zhou, he loves MIT. If there was a temple, he would
go MIT.
MIT. He loves this place. I had to hold him back. He received an MIT offer, and I said, FC, wait, get into GSB, you can do it. And now he's off to GSB. I think MIT is a phenomenal school. I'm thinking I'd probably put it top 5. I would rank MIT, in my opinion, higher than any school on here apart from GSB. I wouldn't put it in the S tier, but I'd firmly put it at the top of the A tier. And the reason for that is MIT's obviously got the world's best engineering, and it does have a phenomenal track record of entrepreneurship. If you want to create companies, you can recruit amazing engineers at MIT, computer scientists, and then go through this business training. And its proximity to, the Boston ecosystem, whether you're in healthcare or, you're interested in consulting is really good. And, you're plugged into this incredibly powerful university infrastructure. And also the average stats are very strong. I've seen talented Harvard undergrads get declined from MIT quite regularly. It's no laughing matter. So I would put this probably at the top of A tier.
Jamie, why don't we move to something a big question mark, Wharton.
Oh, that is a really interesting question. Just for some context, just this Thursday, one of my dear students, actually we helped him get into Harvard for undergrad as well as a bunch of other Ivies, and he just had an interview for Wharton this week. Now, Wharton is really, in my mind, one of the world's best programs for business. For undergrad, Wharton is without peer, the world's best undergraduate business school. Of course, for MBAs, it's a lot more spicy. One thing about Wharton that caught my attention recently is, unlike GSB and HBS, Wharton actually went test optional for a little bit of time, during the pandemic and beyond. I actually don't love that, because I think when schools go test optional, it can create problems where they start admitting students who don't necessarily meet the academic bar they're used to. So I dinged Wharton in my head a little bit for that, but I still think it's, basically definitively S tier, and I'd put it in the 3rd position. Well, certainly at least after GSB for now. Let's see how other things shake up. So I would drop Wharton there behind GSB. I think it's definitely above MIT and definitely behind GSB. So I feel pretty confident in that position. What do you think?
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned earlier that in CLF, kind of cracked the ranking game. I think Wharton somehow has cracked the game of being listed with Harvard and Stanford. I never really understood like the HSW. To me, there is Harvard, Stanford, or Stanford, Harvard, whichever order, and then the rest of the schools, right? So I mean, Wharton is a great school. I mean, everything you say is right. You know, like amazing undergrad program, strong business education. They have a semester in San Francisco. It's just like, for me, it's more, I mean, the top of the A more than the S, but I would agree with you. Let's put it on the S for the moment.
Well,
But
I think you're right, Jonathan. I think you're right. I think I am buying the Wharton Kool-Aid. And I recently finished the UPenn program. I was, a bit too close to that Huntsman Hall. Maybe they're tricking me a little bit. So I think let's move to the head of the A tier. I think that makes more sense.
all right, so let's hit like the other big one. Harvard Business School obviously goes straight to the S tier. Why would you put it in the S tier, Jamie?
I mean, I think HBS. So, from the age of 13, I read this book, What They Teach You at Harvard Business School. And it was one of the first books that inspired me to want to study in America. Harvard Business School is the flagship business school that's really made MBAs famous. From the case study methodology used by business schools all over the world, where you study companies in a very applied context. Everyone is cold called in debates. From the quirky parts of Harvard, where professors have to wear actually a defined kind of almost dress code that's very formal before every presentation, to the use of famous celebrity business folks, like even recently Kim Kardashian came to HBS alongside legends like Bill Ackman. HBS has produced incredible billionaire hedge fund managers, crazy entrepreneurs. It really is the canonical business school. They even have the Harvard Business Review available in airports all over the world. So their brand power is pretty mind-blowing. And the campus is just breathtaking. I mean, I spent some time there as an undergrad. I did an HBS class in terms of, it was called entrepreneurship, another one, business in China. And, walking to that HBS campus from undergrad, I felt like I'd left sort of like, a developing country and found a developed one. It really felt like the mecca of the Harvard campus. So, I think HBS is incredible. It's a tight battle with GSB, but I definitely put it in the S tier. But the question for you, Jonathan, is GSB or HBS? How do you rank them?
It's very hard, right? I think you can't really go wrong with either. I was on pure metrics. I would put GSB above, like lowest acceptance rates, strongest, I would say international component to an extent, most fundraised business school per number of per number of candidates. I'll put Stanford number one, but I mean, to me, it's a tie, honestly. Like it's extremely hard to differentiate them. I mean, I had people who went to HBS. I mean, if you really want to hit a firm like KKR, then HBS is number one, right? But I would say overall, I feel that Stanford has a slight edge. You mentioned every time there's a dual meet, 60, 70% of the time people will pick GSB above Stanford. And last year it was very funny. I had an applicant with both Harvard, Stanford, and initially she was very pro Harvard. Harvard was very good at taking care of her. They put her in touch with CEOs in Switzerland, alumni of HBS and all. She flew to Harvard. She was in love with the campus. Everything you shared, she shared it, almost similar words. But the next day she flew to Stanford. I think before she even met people, she called me. She's like, okay, dude, I've changed my mind. I'm heading to Stanford. It's just the place I want to be. I think Stanford has a magical aura that, HBS also has, but maybe slightly less magical, I would say.
Very well said. The other thing I'd say is, I often say to folks, if you have not gone to, for example, Harvard undergrad and you're an international student, the value of HBS is pretty high because Harvard definitely is a more powerful global brand than Stanford. And so I think I would also counsel, if you're a non-American MBA seeker with no Harvard degree, the HBS degree may be the way to roll. I think, however, if you're an American student, it's a lot more probably GSB first, HBS second. And finally, if you're really interested in entrepreneurship or tech, you definitely want to choose GSB automatically. Whether if you're thinking about, as you said, PE, investing, HBS may have some advantages in some cases. So I think it's not clear. I'm not so hardcore GSB that I would say, it's like GSB or die in this situation. But, I think there's a narrow tilt to GSB overall, but it's certainly a tight competition.
But would you agree to say that any rankings that don't put Harvard or Stanford 1 and 2 is kind of like a useless ranking?
Yeah, just insanity. And the thing I don't understand, right, is you have all these like quote unquote reputable, ranking organizations, and they just have the most wacky rankings. Like, I was looking at some of these numbers, these rankings before, just insanity. So Financial Times ranks HBS 11th, like, or US News 6th, for HBS. It just makes no sense in the world. So, I mean, Polls and Quant seems to get it right with GSB 1 and HBS 2. But yeah, I think I immediately like roll my eyes at any ranking that doesn't put GSB HBS like top 2.
I agree with that. I think like, and that's one thing with rankings. For whoever watched the video, you need to really understand the methodology behind the rankings. So if you open any rankings, they will disclose the methodology. That's very important. For example, Financial Times, there's a lot of things on sustainability now, whereas like US News will be more on the academics and the money, the average salary post MBA. All right, so Jamie, next one. Let's go like another controversial business school, IE Business School, Madrid, Institute of Entrepreneurship. Where do you place it?
Jonathan, your European expertise I may lean on that here, but I mean, my initial take is I'd probably put it quite savagely at the end of the C tier or at the head of the D tier. I mean, I think it's got some more international recognition than the Tel Aviv University's business school, but not that much. And I don't see many applicants coming along seeking it out. But I might be being a bit savage. So over to you to make the final call on that one.
So I'm gonna give you like some like insights into IE Business School. I think IE Business School has been very smart in the way they position their school, right? So they came very late in the game and quickly they identified 2 markets. Number one, the international market, like every other European schools, but more importantly, the family business / entrepreneurship market. So they're one of the most powerful schools in attracting really strong families, like family business, heir and heiress. And as a result, like they really became like a very strong entrepreneurship business school. Now it's nothing compared to like, Stanford or Harvard at the moment, but I would say C is definitely where I will put IE. I will put like IE like towards like the end of C as well. Because I think that's where like it's the most like accurate. But I think it's a very interesting like approach of growing the business school. And also like IE is part of a greater university. They have School of Architecture and they're hiring very good people of academia. So I think it's a C with a potential towards being the next 10 years if they keep growing. But very interesting school for entrepreneurship. For anyone in the family business, you can have an amazing network over there.
Okay, well said. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do respect their differentiated focus on these family businesses, because that is definitely a major segment around the world to have business schools, and definitely these guys need a lot of support. So GSB, interestingly, also had a family business class I took, which I found to be very valuable, but it's pretty cool that IE focuses on that niche so much. Okay, let me throw you back one which I think is a bit tricky. NYU Stern.
NYU Stern. I mean, NYU Stern, I think New York is like the reason why they're still doing very good. I think a lot of people are attracted to being in New York City, right? For the international crowd, at least, like being in the US, but also in New York City. If you look at the Super 10, I think it became one of the schools with like the lowest acceptance rates. It's definitely getting harder and harder to get into NYU. I'll pick NYU like top B at the moment. Because I think like, yes, it's not an Ivy League. We agree on this, but the location is prime. And when you're an MBA student, having the ability to be very proactive in meeting people that you're targeting, either on LinkedIn or, through your own network is very, very valuable, right? One thing I've noticed with all my past candidates, the most successful one post-MBA were the one who were the most proactive in really building relationship and connection. And I think being in New York City is a huge advantage. I'd go like top B. What about you?
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I just think if you're at Tuck, for example, or you're literally in Cambridge, your ability to zip to a meeting is just not that high. Like you can go to London maybe if you're at Cambridge, but NYU Stern, you're literally so close to the financial district. You can take meetings with funds. You can even work part-time in the city. I think that's very powerful. But what I think is even more powerful than NYU Stern is Columbia Business School. So where do you put that?
All right, Columbia. All All right, I'm a bit biased because I'm a bit like Fangzhou. I really love like MIT. I think MIT is like the most underrated top business school in the world. Like I think people sometimes see MIT too much as a geeky school, and I think the Sloan School is fantastic. But I'm tempted to put Columbia right after Wharton and ahead of MIT because of the location. But I would say it's a very close like situation where if you're more finance, obviously Columbia makes sense to an extent because of the location. But yeah, I would be tempted to put it between Wharton and MIT. What do you reckon?
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think it's really tight. It's almost a tie with MIT. I like Columbia's MBA's value investing program. You know, that's a really differentiated program, and a number of the really talented investors that I spent time with when I was investing at Tiger, a number of them had done this Columbia value investing program. They were very talented, these guys. So I think it trains you well, and it has all the NYU location benefits, but with stronger faculty. And you can also draw on some of the other amazing schools at Columbia too, like the world-ranked law school. So you know, there are folks doing some like MBA JDs, for example. There, you don't quite have that option at MIT, but you do at UPenn, at Wharton. I think net Columbia edges out MIT in my mind. So yeah, I would agree with you.
Let's put it here at the moment. I think it's a fair positioning for those schools. All right, Jamie, an easy one, Michigan Ross.
That's a tough one. I don't know if that's easy, but I mean, so UMich as an undergraduate business school has been gaining a lot of traction in recent years, and a lot of folks consider it to be really pretty top tier after, you know, NYU Stern, or, you know, for example, Wharton, they go to UMich Ross next. I think from a stats perspective, let me check this out a little bit. So if you look at Ross, I mean, it's got a 38% admissions rate, GMAT score 720, average salary about 192,000, which is all quite respectable. I think I'd probably rank it behind NYU Stern. I'd probably rank it slightly above Cambridge and Oxford, I think. So I'm going to rank it above Tuck and behind NYU Stern. That might be a bit aggressive, but I do feel like they've been in the game for longer. And I do like how their franchise is kind of compounding because of their strong Ross undergraduate business school as well. So I think there's a path for them to kind of keep building. But I acknowledge it's a bit of controversy there in terms of the call between Dartmouth, Cornell, and UMich. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would have put it. I may have put like Tuck ahead of Ross, because I think like some people are really attracted to like the Ivy League of Dartmouth. But I think I agree. Honestly, over the last 3 years, I think I had more people applying to Ross as a backup than to Tuck. So I would keep it where it is. I think it's a fair positioning to be like, you know, ahead of Tuck. In terms also of like demands, I think like Ross, because like Ross is very strong in technology, entrepreneurship as well. So again, like they kind of on the tech wave as the school has grown significantly. So I'll put Ross where it is. I like it. Nice.
Okay, cool. I'll give you now one of these funky universities. Let's try IIMA.
All right, IIMA, best business school in India, right? Obviously, like the hardest one to pretty much get in across the globe. Again, the reason we listed some Indian and Chinese school, Jamie, is to show people that, you know, like the local context matter, right? I think if you're an Indian in India and you're looking like, you know, and you earn like Indian salary, like going for a US MBA may be super expensive. At the end of the day, all the top companies you're eyeing, you know, like the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Google, and all, they're all gonna hire from IIMA. So I would say from a local context, IIMA would be like, you know, would be almost like a S level, but on the global context, I'll put it. So it's a bit sad here because I'll put it as a C because they're not able to attract enough international applicants. And I'm worried that the Indian school will face the same change as the Chinese schools. You know, when China was like riding like the growth every year, we really thought the Chinese school would take off, you know, like on that way, but people never really consider China, I think, as like a real MBA destination unless they already were in China. So I think because of the global like demand, I'll put like IIMA like bottom C, but it doesn't mean it's a bad school. Like I would say in terms of pure academic power and like brand power within the school, I will put like IMM at the level of any M7, but they also like a bit of diversity. It's a bit too male, not enough female, but that's I think it's an Indian problem. It is also like changing and evolving in a good way. So I'll put IMA in the C. I mean, like there is no way we can put it higher than C because people don't really want to apply there for an Indian school.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then while you're on some of these interesting choices, why don't you walk us through your thinking of some of these other programs at the bottom?
Sure. So like I think it's the same logic. We can clear like the Chinese and like the Indian school, very similarly. So like if we take SIPS for example, in Shanghai, perfect location. I mean, like Shanghai is like surely one of the most exciting cities of the 21st century. So a lot of things happening, a lot of good businesses happening. SIPS has been very strong in the international ranking for the past 10 years. There always been like around like top 10, top 20. But again, like they're not really able to draw like the same level of demand as a European school. So I would say like SIPS for me will be definitely ahead of like IMA because China is a bit more popular than like than India at the moment from like an initial perspective. But it can't be above than C. Even though they have amazing students from China, I would say it's restricted. And the same way, I will put ISB around like IMA and Tsinghua pretty much the same level, like towards the end of C, simply because they are amazing universities, amazing faculty, but they're not able to attract enough candidates. And like the dual degree, Tsinghua, MIT has been a bit of doesn't taken off as much as like I think they were hoping for. So I think like China, India, it was more to show that if you take it in the local context, you want to move to China, you want to find a job in China, you speak Chinese, then SIPS, Tsinghua make a lot of sense. But if you want to have a global career, then it's going to be tricky. But ISB, we have a very fun story. We worked with a Spanish applicant a long time ago, and he could have made into INSEAD, like his profile was okay, but like he would have never gotten a good job pretty much. But he went to ISB, and because he was so exotic, he got job offer from like JP Morgan, I think there was JPM, McKinsey, and Bain, right? And I don't think those jobs he would have gotten there, out of INSEAD. So again, you can choose a battlefield. You can decide to be like the exotic student and also like expose yourself to a new experience. But it's not something that we've been able to convince people to do, to be honest.
That is a fascinating story. And it also speaks to the fact that, good strategy, good location, good setup can make a big difference, especially for landing things like McKinsey, Bain, BCG. Yeah. There's a lot of strategy on which offices to move to and then kind of how to lateral within the firm. So that's a cool story on the ISB front.
All right. Okay. So for you, let's go like up north. Rotman, UToronto. Where do you put it?
Ooh, that is a good question. So first of all, let me say, I think Canada is a pretty attractive place to an MBA. But I'd put US and UK really above Canada quite clearly. But it's certainly a great market. I like proximity to the US. I think it lacks some of the international appeal of some of the strongest programs in Europe. I'd probably put it behind HEC, but above IE. But very curious to hear your thoughts.
No, I mean, like it's actually very interesting, like where you put it, because we have a lot of HEC, like Rodman, kind of like deciding which one to take. Usually they will tend to take HEC above. I think Rodman is very appealing for people coming maybe from like countries with like a weaker passport, because I think at the end of the day, a lot of people also are looking for like longer term immigration. And I think the path to citizenship in Canada is, as of today, one of the easiest, right? I think if you stay for 5-6 years, you're kind of guaranteed to become like a citizen. So I think, you do Rodman for 2 years, you kind of find a job in Canada. It's a dynamic market in Toronto. So like, I think Rodman is like, as a school, I would put it there, definitely like after HEC and like the rest of like the European schools. But I think as a country, Canada is very attractive, as you said. Like it's very appealing to like some, like example, like folks in India or in China, because they see it as a good getaway. So I would say, like, very friendly country towards foreigners. So I would keep it where it is. I think it's a fair like positioning for Rodman. It's a good ranking for them.
All right, let me throw one back at you. The Tepper School of Management. Very interesting.
So CMU, one of the best universities for computer science. I think one cool thing with Tepper was like they really have redesigned the curriculum, like to really be at the intersection of technology and business. So it's very relevant. Very small class size, if I'm not mistaken, less than 180, I think 170 something, so very small. Location is maybe not something I would really go for an MBA, but I think it's very close-knit community. But I can't put it, like above London Business School. I think that's for me, like there is no way Taper is a better school in terms of quality of students and the outcomes. So I'll put Taper even maybe behind Darden, but above HEC.
I think that's fair. I think there's just the US MBA advantage, which hurts, I should say, and gives Taper some edge. So I think I agree with you. I have come across also many extremely passionate UVA alums, but I haven't met too many Taper alums that are staunch advocates for the school. But I'm excited to see some in the comment section roasting us shortly. Okay, so next up on our list, let's talk Duke. So to set the context, as an undergraduate school, and I often like to look at the undergrad schools as sort of a bit of a proxy for how things will unfold, Duke has become one of the most desirable schools on the planet with a 5.1% acceptance rate. Duke is now more competitive than half of the Ivy League. Duke's also been fantastic at raising a lot of capital from donors, folks like, for example, the late Julian Robertson for the Robertson Scholarship. And Duke, as a result, has been able to build out incredible campuses. It looks something like a Stanford plus a Yale got whacked together and dropped in North Carolina. And I do think, the alumni community of Duke is very strong. And it sounds silly to say this, but because Duke is so good at sport, it really engages the alumni in this kind of passionate sort of, hardcore fashion, which really brings the community together and ultimately translates to this close-knit environment. So Duke grads, just love the place, I would say. So where would I put this? I think it's probably stronger than NYU Stern. I think it's probably stronger than the Yale School of Management, and probably it's close to INSEAD. I would put it maybe, it could, on a good day, it could be all the way. Let me look at some of these stats actually. So Duke, okay, so we're looking at a 22% admissions rate. We're looking at a classes of 385, 1720 average GMAT. Okay, interesting. So, 22%, that's making it very selective. My instinct was that it's a bit behind MIT. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stick to my guns here. Okay, I'm gonna put this all the way. I'm gonna put it all the way actually between MIT and Berkeley in the A tier.
Wow, that's a bold move here. It's very interesting. So Duke, Jamie is maybe like the joke I pull out the most with my applicants, because I'm like, most of them come from M7. And okay, so what backup schools are we gonna look at? And Duke is often seen as like, Duke is not good enough for me, right? I'm not in a bad way, but you see what I mean? Like they don't really see it as an attractive option. And I always reminding them like, hey, who is Apple's CEO, right? Which is a chap, right? Tim Cook, right? Where did he go? When he went to earn his MBA at Duke, right? So I think Duke, I wouldn't put it that high on the A tier. It's definitely an A for me. And I would say like your first positioning was really good between Yale and INSEAD, closer to INSEAD. I think it's very fair. I think you're right. Amazing culture, like the Fuqua spirit is extremely strong. People love the school, the sports attachment. I have a friend who went to Duke, like I think 12, 13 years ago, and every March Madness he'd be in front of the games and so on. So I think it's deep down with you. But you know what? I kind of like the bold approach. I like to see Duke high. I think Duke is needs to be more recognized, and I like where it is. I keep it between MIT and Berkeley Haas.
Okay. So let me throw you UCLA Anderson. That's a tricky one.
All right, LA, huge city. If you don't drive, it's tough. It's not easy to navigate around. A bit too much temptation as well, in that sense. Prime is interesting. There is nothing wrong with UCLA Anderson MBA. It's appealing, I would say, because of the location for some people, but to me, it's definitely this one you may disagree, Jamie, but I'll put it after Cornell. So for me, it's Cambridge will be a better MBA than Anderson today.
Ooh, that's pretty interesting. I think UCLA, let me see. I think UCLA Anderson's got some pretty punchy. Okay, so its average salary is actually notably worse than the other schools compared to the other top US MBAs. Still a lot higher than Cambridge and Oxford's cumulative earning power, but at a 40% acceptance rate, it's basically the least selective school on my spreadsheet, actually. So I think your analysis, I mean, it's even behind UV. Is it behind UV on your list? Ooh, yeah. So, um, I think the one benefit UCLA has is UCLA's undergraduate brand is getting super strong. It had over 100,000 applicants. UCLA is becoming incredibly difficult to get into. So I think UCLA Anderson can kind of ride the wave of its undergrad school a bit. But I like your position. I think that's fair. I might put it even lower maybe because of its admissions rate. Potentially I put Oxford higher because of the relative brands, but
don't we make a switch? We replace Darden by UCLA. I think Darden maybe is better placed on the B tier, and UCLA like at the level of like LBS on the C tier.
Let's do it. Let's flip it. Let's go for it. And for the UVA fans, they're going to be stoked by that last minute move.
Yeah, I think it's fair for that. You're right. Like a very strong investment, private equity. Like it's a good school on this one. And the last one on the list, like we go back to Spain, IESE co-founded with Harvard Business School. They do more cases at IESE than Harvard. It's on 600 over the 2 years of the MBA. So it's very, very case study driven. Where would you put IESE on your list?
I'm going to probably put it, I'm thinking it's sort of trailing near the bottom of the C tier. But I'll throw it to you for the final verdict.
I think in terms of demand, it's very similar to HEC. They could go either way, IESE, HEC. Like again, it's a bit like Harvard, Stanford at the C tier. We could put HEC ahead. We could put IESE ahead. It's not going to be really massively different, but I think it's a fair positioning. It's attractive to like certain students. I think like being in Spain, in the EU is very attractive. The UK also has changed the immigration policy, so you can't bring your spouse as a master's student, and for some people it's an issue. So like Spain and France are attracting a bit more students. So I would say like I'll put IESE as a solid C. And I think overall, like Jamie, when I look at the list, I'm kind of like comfortable with this kind of like positioning. What do you think overall? Do you think we made a mistake somewhere?
I think we've done a pretty good job. Let's just check this. So the only thing that I'm thinking about is, are we confident in our Tuck, Cambridge, Cornell, Darden, Oxford position? It feels funny that we've got this spread between Cambridge and Oxford. Do we need these guys to be side by side maybe?
Yeah, so why don't we move like Cambridge a bit back? Or why don't we move the UK a bit up? No, to be honest, I think like Cambridge is better than Cornell in my opinion. But Cornell is more attractive because of the US component. But I think we need to look at both sides, right? The attractiveness is one thing. But strength of the program today, I've sent better people to like Oxford and Cambridge for the last 2-3 cycles than I've sent to Cornell. So I'd go with like, the people I've sent to, it's a bit biased, but I would put it like this.
Okay, and then the other one I want to check is Duke, Haas, Chicago, Northwestern, INSEAD, YSM. How do we feel about that A tier ranking? I'm pretty confident. I think I rate the Wharton, Columbia, MIT order, and then I think we just need to make sure we're confident in the next 6 in the A tier. I feel pretty good about it, but maybe do we need to?
I'll put.
We have to put. Should we switch?
Go ahead.
Should we switch Chicago and Berkeley maybe?
Yeah, I was thinking of this one. There's 2 switch. I was thinking of this one, but sorry, not this one. I was thinking Chicago, Berkeley. And I'm actually, I don't know, this one, no, Kellogg wins. Kellogg is above, like INSEAD in terms of demand. No, I'm okay like this. I like it. I like to see Yale and Duke on the A tier.
Beautiful.
The last one before I let you go, Jamie, London Business School, you're sure you want to keep it on the C tier? This one is a very controversial because usually it's INSEAD, LBS, kind of like at the same level in a lot of people's opinion. We have INSEAD on A, we have LBS on C. Some people will be like angry to see Cambridge and Oxford above LBS, but I like it. I like the way you brought it. But are you sure you want to keep it on the C tier? Last chance.
Oh, good question. I'm just thinking about folks that have gone to the respective schools. I mean, I could sleep with London Business School being at the bottom of the B tier. I could sleep with that, but I kind of like this a bit better. Your final call.
let's keep it as it's. I like it. I mean, I'm sure like many people are going to comment and like, you know, share their thoughts and disagree with us. I think again, rankings are always like, you know, prone to be questioned. But I believe like at least we have Stanford, Harvard 1, 2, 2, 1. And I think that makes already a lot of sense in comparison to many of the other rankings, putting HBS at 6 or HBS at 11. No, I like it. Thanks for your time, Jamie. And looking forward to the next one.
Amazing. Absolutely. And for students out there thinking about top MBA programs, Crimson has sent more kids to the Ivy League than any other organization on the planet. You've heard some of the amazing expertise Jonathan's offered today, and the track record of our MBA team sending folks to programs like HBS, GSB, Wharton, you know, Columbia, YSM, INSEAD, beyond is really unmatched. And especially for students who are thinking about a multi-year strategy to an MBA, I began thinking about how to get into GSB from really when I set foot on campus as an 18-year-old. And there are all kinds of cool programs to explore, 2+2 programs, deferred admissions programs, you know, dual degree programs combining, you know, MBAs with, for example, you know, public policy degrees or law degrees, a lot of different strategy variants out there to think about. An MBA can really transform your career trajectory. You can use it to hop different industries. You can use it to unlock really selective, you know, groups like management consulting, private equity, or even product manager roles in big tech. And it can also be a great way to get into search funds or raising your own capital. So definitely for those of you out there thinking about the MBA, you're welcome to have a chat with us. We'd love to meet talented, ambitious students and see where their career can take them. Jonathan, any final words for our crew?
I think you say it all. We're looking forward to chatting with all of you. I think like, you know, an MBA is powerful. It's not always necessary, but it's an extremely powerful career tool. So, you know, come get in touch with us, discuss your plan, and we'll be more than happy to, like, you know, share our thoughts.
Have a great night. See you guys.